Do you need sex to stay in love? No, because think about hookup culture. Think about one-night stands. They're very normalized. Again, I'm not knocking them. I'm not dissing them. But look at it this way. If you can have sex without love, why can't you have love without sex?
In this series, we explore the big idea of love and discuss the themes surrounding romantic relationships, including commitment,
in these conversations is that
intimacy,
Okay, textbook definition.
and boundaries.
Showing respect for another person.
What do we mean when we say, and what are the common values guiding the ways we love? Come along as we navigate love in Singapore. Love, a warm and fuzzy word we use to express our affection for family, friends, and that special someone. But what sets romantic love apart?
The intimacy and the trust, basically.
You feel more comfortable with them compared to your friends. Like you dare to tell them everything.
For me is that some things I do my family doesn't know, but everything that I do she knows about it. So it's more easier to share things to her.
I think sexual attraction is a big part. So I think people say love at first sight, but how do you do it? When you see it, it's basically based on your physical looks, like your looks and everything.
Physical, I suppose, right? Between a couple and friends or family.
Like physically, I mean, you have like your hugs and kisses, but I think for emotionally wise, you know that they are there for you and that they won't like stab you in the back or anything like that. So there's comfort in knowing that. That's what I think.
The intimacy is there also with your loved one.
To find out how we've come to think about what intimacy in romantic relationships looks like, we spoke to Dr. Carissa Fu, a lecturer of humanities whose research focuses on women's writing and gender studies.
Romantic relationships are very much forged by what we consume, what we see, so you can think about mimicry and modeling. So often these can be reinforced by media material, culture. So in the 90s, early 2000s, there were romantic comedies, right? Those were boom in Hollywood. And we sort of thought of relationships between men and women through the dynamics as we see on the TV, right? Where you have that first kiss, that first night, that look away from the camera when the blanket goes over. If we think about romance and we trace it etymologically, it means narrative, it means a course. So once one enters a romantic relationship, it's almost as if you have a narrative plotted out for you. You have certain checkpoints, your first kiss, your first date, your first night, your marriage, family, futurity. It's all charted out like a story. I think connection and intimacy is central in all relationships, right? But very often, emotional connection is interwoven with physical connection. So you think about it, two strangers who have just met and they sort of like each other. They're away, standing apart in a room, and then you get closer when you know each other, and then you start to hold hands. And then when you get a bit closer, you hug and you kiss and you do other intimate stuff. There's almost a hierarchy or a progression of the gestures of love. And at the top of the hierarchy is often sex. This is not prescriptive, but most couples, most people in love do follow that script.
The prominence of sex when it comes to romance also extends to marriage. In Singapore, there are several grounds on which marriage can be deemed voidable, and a few of them center on consummation, or in other words, sex.
Under the legal system, the law almost requires sexuality to be bound up with love. If you think about it, in Singapore, for example, and we spoke about this, under the Women's Charter, if a marriage is not consummated, or if it's an unconsummated relationship, then the marriage is voidable.
Laws aside, our ideas around sexual attraction and its role in love have also been shaped by the sexual revolution of the 1960s.
This intense interest in sex really came about in the 1960s with the sexual revolution. It was regarded as a time of sexual liberation where people would use sex as a way to liberate themselves. So this is when people would start to have sex outside the traditional boundaries of, say, marriage and monogamy, when oral contraceptions were administered, when abortion was legalized. So you have all these discussions, protests about sex. So I think one of the offshoot of a hypersexualized society is the fact that the focus on sex has been shifted from something that happens in private to something that is for display and in celebration. We often think of the negatives of a hypersexualized society, But if we try to switch that around, we think, oh, it actually offers conversations for us to understand, why are we so obsessed with sex? Why is love unquestionably bound up with sex? So it is an opportunity to really have conversations about, maybe we can decouple sex and love. Maybe we can think about romance as something that might lead to sex, but it doesn't have to as well.
One group of people who don't see sex as the be-all and end-all in romantic relationships are those who identify as asexual. Natalie and Srijan are a young asexual couple who have been dating for over a year. In modern society, where sex is seen as a progression of romantic love, what do sex and intimacy mean to them? What is asexuality?
Textbook definition. Asexuality is the absence of sexual attraction. That's it, period, full stop, nothing more, nothing less. And I think that's, simply put, that's as simple and as complicated as you want to make it. I thought that the experience I was going through was the normal experience, and it kind of felt to me like everyone is in on some joke that I don't really understand, and I'm just kind of playing along with it, you know. And when people that I know, like friends, they would say, "Oh my God, so and so is so hot," you know, or someone says, "I would do unspeakable things to so and so." It just feels like it's a joke, like, "Oh, haha, of course, like so would I guess," but not really. And I think it wasn't until poly that I started reading up about things, like started reading up about different sexualities, stumbled across the term asexuality, read more about it, and then had a moment of, oh no, I think that's me. So that was my moment.
I feel like for me, my moment came much later. As I got into relationships, I didn't have the greatest start in relationships, but what happened was there was always a disconnect between me and my partners. The disconnect would be in terms of what they would describe as attraction would be very different from what I would describe as attraction, which has led to certain misunderstandings, which has led to some people feeling less wanted, which is on me because I could not communicate what I felt in the right words, in the appropriate words. It was much later that I started reading up about it, I started speaking to you as well, and I started to understand that, okay, maybe this can be some version of this word that I'm not familiar with. But again, it comes down to what it is to me and what my definition of it is.
Sex as we know it, the big umbrella term of sex, that's important in romantic relationships. Because sex in itself is a connection. It's like, how do you reach this connection with your partner in a romantic relationship? It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be on a bed naked and you have to have penetrative sex. That's not just it, right? So if you were to unlearn your definition of sex beyond just that, right? Yes, sex is a very big part of romantic relationships. It's more about how you approach it, how you define it, how you understand it.
I think something that's even more important, and we do not speak about this as often as we should, is sexual compatibility. Does your definition of sex, does your understanding of sex compare to this other person? Like, how does it compare? Does it clash? Does it coincide in a nice way? Does it play together in a harmonious way? Otherwise, how are you going to make a life for yourself? And it all, again, boils down to communication. Can you communicate what sex means to you in a relationship, in a healthy relationship? Love and intimacy are inextricably intertwined. To some people, intimacy is sex. To some people, intimacy can be sex and other things. To some people, intimacy can just be anything other than sex.
I think intimacy to us is, to me, on my side of things, it's having a good, long discussion about something and coming to an understanding about my partner, coming to understand how he views things, and you know, how is it different from how I view things, and can we reach like a consensus and so on. To me, that's intimacy, understanding.
I feel very similarly about intimacy. I feel like a good prolonged debate about something that doesn't really matter in the long scheme. A very pointless debate about something that does not affect us directly. And coming to a conclusion, coming to an understanding at the end of that is, I feel the most connected in that moment. But yes, we also have physical intimacy in our relationship. And that physical intimacy is, I would say, it is a part of intimacy and not all of it. Mental intimacy is also a part of intimacy in a relationship.
Emotional intimacy.
Emotional intimacy. Social intimacy as well.
I think if you're going to boil it down to, do you need sex to stay in love? I think that's the more the more straightforward question that most people would ask. You know, if you're in a relationship, do you need sex to keep it going? No, you don't.
Yeah, you don't. There are so many couples who, for different reasons, may not even be able to have sex anymore.
I think it's important to also note that asexuality is different from chastity. It's not a choice. Why can't you approach a loving romantic relationship or a loving relationship, period, without the need for sex? It depends a lot on intimacy and how you approach it. Is your definition of intimacy different from somebody else's? Yes. Now, how are you going to approach it?
So, how else can intimacy look like?
Attention to detail lah. If she tells me something small like today she has had a bad day or whatever, I'll try to cheer her up by bringing her to places she likes, cooking food that she likes and stuff like that. Yeah.
Hugs, eating together, and just chilling with each other and enjoying each other's silence.
Like you show that you care. Yeah. Like you spend time with that person. Different type of love language.
Love language, I guess. Yeah.
What are your love language?
Mine is quality time and quality time and what's the other one?
Acts of service?
Acts of service, yes. Hers is physical touch and quality time. Yeah.
Doesn't only have to be physical touch. I think it can be through words of affirmation or through service. Let's say I go and drive and pick up my girlfriend, that kind of things. I think it's a good way to show that I love her as well. Yeah.
Oh, mine is through act of service. So whatever he wants, I will try to show it by action. Yeah. So that's the way of me showing my love and care for him.
Physical attraction matters, but ultimately it's based on the emotional connection you feel with someone to want to get into a relationship with the person. Yeah.
I think with any relationship, it's to have two people of very different contexts, very different backgrounds, very different likes and dislikes come together. And it's really about trying to make things work. It's a commitment, it's love, but it's also this, we're going to do this together. And often that comes with many talks, conversations about our likes and our dislikes, about our interests, about our sexual needs. How intimate we would want ourselves to be in a relationship, how distant we might want sometimes. And it's constantly working through things, reaching a point of mutual understanding, mutual compromise, such that both people are equally committed in this conversation, in this relationship with one another.
While sex is often portrayed as a culmination of romantic intimacy, relationships in reality require more than just that. So, what does intimacy mean to you? Thanks for watching this episode of our series on love. If you're in the mood for more love, check out the rest of our episodes where we explore the meaning of love and commitment beyond the one, and discuss boundaries and consent in relationships.